this black man who was accused of committing a crime, and it was N-word this, N-word that throughout the book.
Okay.
And teachers reading that book to students, what's their role in saying or not saying that word in an academic sense?
You want to know my thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Everything black on black. If I studied that facts on facts.
Welcome back to another episode of the Black is the New Rich podcast. We are on episode 36. And if it's your first time here, we talk about entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and the mindset. Today, we got a very special guest because he has a unique field that he's tapped in. And, you know, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So I feel like this subject is very important. But, I don't want to take the spotlight. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for having me, first of all. My name is Alex Battick. I am a lawyer in Peel Region. I'm a Brampton boy, now a Mississauga man. But yeah, I've been running my own practice since I got called to the bar. I became a lawyer in 2018. I'm running this, from my perspective, a rather unique practice. I only generally focus on education law. Education law being more of this broader idea of the industry. So, sports law, health law, these different broad umbrella terms for the industry and the law and legal stuff, legal issues that pop up in it. So education law is the sector education, whether it's kindergarten to higher education, really trying to just tap into that market. All the legal issues related to school is what I want to be able to bring services for and support.
Okay, dope. Yeah. So we're going to talk about the education law side of things soon, but I want to know how you got into everything. How did you get here today? So, what did you do after school? Did you know that you wanted to become a lawyer when you're in high school or middle school? How did you end up here today?
Yeah. Let me preface all this by saying I come from a family of educators.
Oh, sick. Okay, it makes sense.
My mom at this point is a superintendent. She was a teacher. My dad, retired teacher, used to be a science department head.
So it runs in the family.
And my sister is a principal now.
Oh, jeez. Okay, lit.
So yeah, I got this deep connected route to, I think, education. Growing up, I never wanted to be a teacher. It was the last thing on my mind, to be honest. But I was always interested in forensic science. I remember being in grade 8, and there was this science fair. And at the same time, CSI was out. You remember watching CSI?
Yeah, of course.
And I remember getting this CSI kit where you can do like the black light to get everything to glow in the dark.
Yeah.
I remember setting up a whole like little display on that, and I was really into it. Grade 9, I took sciences because everyone takes sciences. Grade 9, 10, still interested in being a forensic scientist.
Interesting.
I get to grade 11. And I have chemistry in my first semester, bio and physics in my second semester.
That's rough.
Everyone's telling me, Alex, you got it good. Chemistry on its own, physics and bio a little bit more manageable together.
Yeah.
So I'm doing my chemistry class, and everything is going over my head. The only reason I'm not even kidding you.
So you're not doing well.
I'm not doing well. The only reason I passed is because my boy, who's a doctor now, guided me through that. I'm pretty sure I cheated a couple of times. I'm not even lying. So after I finished chemistry, I'm like, I can't do forensic science. That's not my skill set. Not my it's one thing to not do well at something and have the motivation and desire to get better at it. That wasn't the case for the physics class. So I tapped into something else, and I've always been a good writer.
Interesting.
I remember in grade 6, I remember my teacher gave me like some really good comments about like, this is like a great story you came up with off the top of your head in grade 6. So always a good writer. Never graded English class, but just being able to communicate.
Okay.
So after I did terribly in physics or chemistry, I dropped every science after that.
Oh, jeez.
And I started
to your last year of high school.
This was grade 11. Yeah. So
grade 12, you didn't take any more sciences.
I didn't take any. No, after grade 11, first semester, all science is done. So second semester, I remember I started to take intro to social psych and anthropology. I think that was in grade 11. I did like a world religion class.
Okay.
I did history classes, and I even did one of the more kind of inspiring classes, which is surprising, is nutrition class, one of those cooking classes. And I remember going into that class, and the teacher was this like D's black guy, very masculine.
Yeah.
Here he is in an apron teaching us how to like clean and cook. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. And one of the things I remember learning about in that class, and I'm probably going to go off onto tangents, but this is just one of the lessons I learned at the time. He called it dovetailing.
Mm-hmm.
And dovetailing is the idea like you have something in the oven, or it's baking or cooking or whatever, and you have all this dead time, this time where you can just do something else now. Yeah, yeah. You know that the meal is being prepped. You can't do anything else. It's just sitting there. You got to wait. But instead of just doing nothing while you wait, you do something else.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm saying that because it all kind of pulls together in like this long hindsight of how I got to where I am today. But that was one of the lessons I picked up. So these courses started to give me like different world views. It was a lot different from a science where like I'm learning a fact, I'm knowing it, I have to memorize it. These were kind of like
perspectives, opinions.
Exactly. Inspiration in a sense that like that's how the world works. I'm more curious to learn a little bit more about it now.
Interesting.
Or tap into a different side of how I'm viewing the world kind of thing. Yeah. So like I said, I took all those courses. By the end of grade 12, I remember having this teacher who suggested, look into sociology. So I looked in sociology, seemed okay. I went to undergrad for sociology. And at this point, I had no idea what I was going to do. You can be a sociologist, but that's just education. It's one of those autonomous degrees. And it took me a while to understand what an autonomous degree was, but it's one in which it's not filtering you into a particular profession.
Okay.
For example, nursing.
Yeah.
You go over to a school for nursing.
To become a nurse.
Okay, engineers, you can likely become an engineer after you complete all those courses. So it filters you into a profession. Sociology wasn't that. So here I am in sociology, and what am I to do? Well, there's one of these courses called experiential learning. And it's the idea that you have your courses, but then you're applying it to real world experiences. So you had to volunteer in the community and kind of apply what you've learned to that volunteer experience.
Okay.
So I think this is second year now. I'm in sociology still, and I decide to volunteer at a legal clinic. And this was more
That's
so
the first. Okay.
This was more so like the idea of volunteering because I needed to get like I was always into volunteering.
Yeah.
But now it was like take what I'm learning and apply it to this experience, and that was really cool for me because sociology, what was I going to do with it practically? I didn't know. And when I went to this legal clinic in Hamilton, shout out to them by the way, they I don't know if you know this, but Hamilton has a disproportionately high disability rate in not only the province but in Canada.
Oh wow, no,
yeah,
I never
it's like
knew.
the disability capital
Okay.
at the time, at least.
Yeah.
Of the country and the province. So what I want at the time, what I was doing is trying to figure out from a sociological perspective. Like my analysis was like by no means an academic study.
Yeah.
But from the things that I've learned, how am I going to apply that to this experience where the legal clinic is supporting people who are applying for what's called Ontario Disability Support Program.
And you're thinking like that then.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm like, so the legal clinic is helping these people, but why are there so many people needing this help?
What's
in
the root
first
of
place?
it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And let me just say that the sociology is the study of groups. So it's understanding, and this is a great quote I learned about the perspective of sociology. Individual issues are a reflection of social problems.
Okay.
So when we think about disability, this individual is coming to the legal clinic for ODSP support. They're appealing a disability decision by the government. Why is it that this individual has found themselves in a circumstance where either they have a disability and need support, or why are they unable to get access to that support?
Yeah.
Either way, some people like to frame it as an individual problem, but sociology kind of reminds us like, no, these are grander, bigger problems than just the individual.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they found themselves in that circumstance.
Yeah.
So this is basically leading up to me saying this is how I found law. This is how I was curious or interested in the idea of going into into law. The actual journey now to like becoming a lawyer was after that. I remember volunteering at the legal clinic and getting a job at this personal injury law firm. I'm not going to say what the firm was, but I'm going to say I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it. And I remember going every day into the summer. I was working there in the summer and volunteering in the summer as well. I was going into that personal injury firm every day. Hated it.
Yeah.
I was getting paid well.
Yeah.
But I hated it.
Wasn't your passion?
No.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it was just a passion, but also like going into the legal clinic every day, I enjoyed it. I feel like I understood the stories behind the clients. I understood that the bigger purpose. I remember reading through one of the files one day, and I believe one of the issues was that we were trying to support this individual get money so they can buy a boat. And at the same time, I was volunteering at a legal clinic, speaking to people who were entrepreneurs themselves, super successful. One day they have an accident and now their whole life is falling apart, and they rely on the government support just to be able to eat, sleep, and live. And they can't even get access to that. So the issues that I'm working for, completely different, night and day.
Like super privileged. And the other ones, like, they need help.
Right. Yeah. And plenty of different reasons why people might need a personal injury law firm. But at the time, that experience was like, I see a lot more value for myself in the, at least in legal aid.
True.
So at this time, I was like, I really want to be a legal aid lawyer. So I'm going to fast forward it to law school now. I went to England to study law.
Oh, you're the second person on here that did it in the UK. Courtney, he did his law school in UK too.
Okay, yeah. Did he stay there as well?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That was a dope experience. I went in 2014 to 2016, and if you know Jamaicans, you know a lot of Jamaicans are there as well, right?
Yeah, of course. My grandma's over there.
Oh yeah. A lot of my family are over there on my dad's side, so it was a great opportunity to learn. And when we're talking about the idea of dovetailing, this is one of the principles I remember. One of the reasons why I decided to go to law school abroad is whether I do it in Canada or abroad, I'm going to have to do law school. There's that time that has to be dedicated to law school.
No matter what.
No matter what. So it's in the oven, it's baking. What am I going to do with that time while I'm in law school? How am I going to take advantage of the rest of my time while I'm in law school? I'm going to be there, but what else can I do now on top of it? One of those things that was important to me was like seeing family that I've never met before.
In the UK?
In the UK,
okay,
exactly.
Amazing. Yeah.
Whole different culture as well. Never been abroad. So all these different things were just like, yes, while it's baking, let me get this life experience as well. It was one of the best decisions to go to the UK because they offered a few things that opportunities here wouldn't have provided me. One of those things was this pro bono initiative, and pro bono is free legal work. One of these projects was called the School Exclusions Project. And
so that's another important piece to why you're here. I
exactly.
see the lead up.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm in England looking for new opportunities I couldn't have gotten in Canada. One of those is to be able to, as a law student, literally be the advocate for that family, like represent them.
Oh, right, like
no training wheels kind of thing.
Okay, sick though. That's dope. Okay, lit.
Yeah, and it's always such a, in hindsight, looking back on things and seeing the full circle moment, because the first case I had was a Jamaican family, and he was a little boy accused of like some sexual violence against another student. They put him in jail. He was like probably in grade 5 or something like that.
Grade 5.
Yeah, grade school, definitely grade school. Yeah, it was facts are wild.
Yeah.
And he got excluded, which is the same thing as an expulsion here.
Okay.
So kicked out of school, and my task was to advocate for him to get back into the school. A bunch of details, but sad story is that I wasn't successful.
Oh, really? I
know. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
And in hindsight as well.
So he had a prosecutor?
So I wasn't familiar with the criminal side of things.
Okay.
I just know he went to, I don't think he got charged with anything.
Okay.
I think they were just taking the situation really seriously and put him in jail, like to scare him. But that's,
come on, guys.
And
yeah.
it's yeah, we can talk all about that
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to win that one,
Mm-hmm.
and to some extent, that I think really stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that a couple things. The first, like, I didn't know this. I didn't know people did this. I didn't know lawyers represented students who were expelled, suspended, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And had I not gone to England, I don't think I would have had exposure to that area of law.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing was I didn't know that the skills that I needed to develop were not this idea of, and it's called sharp practice.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was with the family and with the principal, I was being very standoffish. Like, I remember I had my legs crossed and trying to kind of outsmart them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, in hindsight, everything's like, no, that's not how you successfully argue a point.
Mm-hmm.
You need to appreciate that you're working with this other person to resolve a matter.
Oh, that's a different perspective.
Very
change.
different perspective.
Okay, interesting.
And a lot of people think lawyers and lawyering is about being sharp and being very, like, harsh.
Like, I'm right.
I'm right, you're wrong.
Yeah.
This is how you should look at, this is what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
And you're only going to kind of create a bigger gap between your position and the other person's position. But the last thing you want is the other party to be ingrained in their position. So that experience taught me a few different things. Finished law school, come back to Canada, and I'm like, where am I going to be able to do this?
Yes.
I liked this area of law.
Yeah.
Remember, I did personal injury. I hated it.
Yeah.
I liked the legal clinic system,
Yeah.
but I wasn't super interested in those particular areas of law.
Yeah.
And while I was in England, a lot of people were doing the corporate-y business stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't me. The only piece of law that I was like, I could do this was that school stuff.
Yeah, because you lost too. It weighed on you.
It might have been that. Might have been the fact that I have parents that are teachers.
Yeah.
Might have been the fact that it was a
true.
black boy, and this was a situation where there's a lot more control there as well.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to advocate for a family and understand and appreciate issues of human rights, discrimination, things like that. I wish I understood that a little bit better at the time, but knowing what I know now, I think that's one of the domains where I think there is power for change. Being able to advocate these positions in school, I think there are many people who are open to hearing things like that, wanting to do better in school.
Yeah.
So, for, like I said, all those different reasons, I was attracted to this area of law. Come back, trying to find out, where am I going to do this?
Yeah.
And I found a legal clinic that specialized in supporting young people from age 5 to 25, I believe, basically that age gap, and diverse areas of law, including education law.
Oh,
and they served everyone across the province. So I'm like,
I need to get there.
I need to get into that job.
Yeah.
And the story behind that is actually pretty interesting because they didn't have a job posting. What I actually did was I messaged them and said, I want to work for you, and I'll do it for free if I have to.
Big. Why do you think that was important?
I was reading a book called Mastery at the time. Have you heard of it?
And is it by Robert Greene?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm reading Laws of Human Nature right now.
Okay, yeah. So Mastery is basically about how to master your craft, and the book is divided into different segments of like mastering your craft. And one of the first stages is the apprenticeship stage, and a lot of it spoke to me. But one of the bigger themes at the time to me was value the experience over the money.
Interesting.
At the time, and let me say that I'm coming from a background super privileged. I had a lot of opportunities where I didn't need to rely on like how am I going to eat the next day or where am I going to sleep. So the ability to even say I can work for you for free is definitely something that not everyone can do. But understanding my social situation, my privilege allowed me to be able to exploit that.
Makes sense. So because you weren't necessarily in like survival mode.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah. I was
sense.
just focused on how am I going to get to where I want to be in terms of being a lawyer.
Yeah.
How am I going to do that the path of least resistance, and how am I going to get to the exact place I want to be. And I knew I had to like break down barriers to do that. Have you read the book The Third Door?
No. By who?
I'm not sure. I think his name starts with Alex and his last name is Benian or something like that.
Okay.
I might be wrong. But the third door is this idea that people would consider like a club.
Uh-huh.
So you're just pulling up to the club, and there's a long line of people. You see one guy cop out a limo, walk up to the bouncer, like say his name or give
then
whatever.
he gets right in.
Gets right in. That's the first door.
Yeah.
It's this idea that door is for a select few with privileged opportunities to be able to just walk into that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
The second door is that long line of people. You're gonna have to wait in that line. It's gonna take you some time.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to play those games.
But
That's the second door. It might take you a long time, but that's the door that everyone else goes through.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two doors. But there's always a third door, and people never really see the third door. But the third door is in the back. It's in the back. You have to jump over the garbage bin, go through like some bushes, find that small door or a small window, and crawl through that window, walk through the chef's area, and then you get into the club. Mm-hmm. You have to do a lot more.
Hoops.
A lot more in terms of crawling through the hoops, doing whatever, just to get to that opportunity. But it's there. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily have to have the privilege, and you don't necessarily have to wait and just kind of
wait your turn.
Wait your turn. Yeah, exactly. If you want to work for it, there's that third door. It's going to be harder, a lot more things to get through, but the third door is there. So I have all these ideas going through my mind about what I need to do to get to where I want to be. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the apprenticeship stage, I want that experience. I don't care about the money.
Yeah.
How am I going to get that experience in this circumstance? Well, they don't have that position posted. They don't necessarily have the funding right now for it. But let me see how I can make sure I can get into that position. Mm-hmm. So that was it. I was able to secure the position, and I was there for 10 months as a part of what's called the articling period. It's an apprenticeship, basically. Mm-hmm. So I did it, learned a lot of dope skills, still networking with people who are in this area of law that I just grew to appreciate a lot more. And after that, I got called to the bar and decided
here you are.
all this experience, let me open up shop. There's no one else doing this as a niche practice.
Yes.
In fact, I was at the legal clinic, and what I noticed was a lot of people who wanted the education service fell into one of several categories. Either you qualified for the services because your income was low enough, or you could afford to pay your own lawyer. You called, but you're like, you found out that you didn't meet the eligibility criteria, but we referred you to another person who was able to take it on because you have the resources to do so. But then there was a group of people who didn't qualify for the services because they just made too much, but they didn't have enough expendable resources to pay for that lawyer. So you have this kind of middle category of people who need that legal support for their family in this education system, but can access the government support, and they don't have the resources to get the private support. So who's going to be there? And I figured out, let me create that. There's an opportunity there.
Interesting.
So that's a long-winded story about
how you got here today.
How I got here today. Yeah.
Okay, because even like doing research for this episode, you're the first person that I know that was in education. I was like, what is that? What do they do? So for the regular person who either has children at home, what types of issues that they may come across that they can be like, okay, you know what? I need an education lawyer. Yeah. What are some of those issues?
Were you ever suspended in school?
Yes. I mean, no. Was I? No. Personally, no. No,
okay. Yeah, so that's the first thing I started with was suspension and expulsions. Okay. So when it comes to school, public school at least, there's a difference between the impacts of a suspension or expulsion in a public school versus a private school. In a public education system like Ontario, you have a lot of protections. These protections are either in statute, meaning legislation, the Education Act, or they are kind of common law ideas of what's called procedural fairness. So meaning you have to get notice of your suspension. You have to know what were the allegations and the opportunity to respond to that. Okay. Things like that. So that's one of the areas of law that I support families with. If we're talking about higher education, some students have, for example, been accused of cheating. But the interesting thing when it comes to the idea of discipline, because suspensions and expulsions are discipline as well, you have to appreciate that there are two things that you need to consider, the organization or school. The first is progressive discipline. Your first offense should be treated very different from your fifth offense.
Facts. Yeah.
So if this is my first time getting caught cheating in university,
Why are you getting expelled?
I shouldn't. You give me the benefit of the doubt. Let me be able to show you I won't do this again, or I learned.
Yeah.
The other factor is a mitigating factor, or mitigating
What does that mean?
factors. So mitigating is the idea that it kind of you did it. You might acknowledge that this happened, but when you add mitigating factors, you suggest that the penalty shouldn't be as great because you should consider all these other things surrounding the context of it.
Okay.
For example, if I had a student who would acknowledge that she cheated, yes,
Yeah.
I did do whatever, but at the time I had a lot of mental health issues at the time. I was dealing with a lot. I was coping with either my family had COVID or
passing away or something.
yeah. All these things that definitely give you it distinguishes it from
Like it clouds your judgment kind of thing.
it distinguishes it from me saying you cheated, you're a bad person, and yeah, you cheated, but you had a lot going on, and these
Okay.
are some of the reasons why you may have made such a poor judgment. So yeah, in the sense that I did cheat, but you have to understand that I wasn't in my right frame of mind, and had I been in my right frame of mind, which might have been outside of my control, I wouldn't have done this. So when it comes to academic appeals, my role is to try and figure out what are those progressive discipline kind of principles that could be applied, or mitigating factors that reduce the penalty. You might say you didn't do it, and that's one thing, to deny the allegation and then we prove you didn't do it.
Yeah.
But in a lot of circumstances is the person acknowledges they did wrong,
Yeah.
but the question is,
Why is it so harsh?
yeah, or at the very least, bring my penalty down.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, going back to like the suspension thing, right? Let's say like I'm a parent and my child is suspended, and they go to the principal, right? And how do they get from the principal to you? Like, what would click there?
Yeah, and this is the unfortunate reality in Ontario's education system is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. That was like the whole thing, like leading up to this podcast.
Yeah.
I was like, how do they get to you?
100%. And it's the ignorance that I think institutionally, I'm not saying any individual within the school system deliberately does this, but institutionally, there certainly is this desire to not let people appreciate their rights and
Yes.
responsibilities.
Okay.
Had you been aware that, for example, there's a legal clinic that you can call up and get free advice for how to deal with your suspension, I'm sure many more people would be using it and advocating
100%.
against it. There's this organization called Empowerment Squared in Hamilton. I worked with them a couple of years ago, and we did what's called the Hamilton Education Law Program. The idea about that was to equip people with the knowledge of these education law issues. So we talked about, and we created like pamphlets, and there's a legal clinic in Toronto that has all these pamphlets as well. But the idea that you should be informed about what are the rights related to special education? What are your rights if your child is bullied or harassed, suspended or expelled, or attendance rights, for example? All these different things most people aren't aware of. So if you're not aware of it, you don't know how you can appeal.
Seek help.
Seek help even, yeah. So if you don't even know how to contact a person to learn more about it, you might have to rely on yourself. And if I'm a parent working my full-time job,
That's a lot.
that's a lot. I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the law. I don't know
Yeah.
anything about the law that you're referring to when you suspended my child. And the expectation that I should be able to firstly catch up on all of this and be able to make a coherent argument about it, then find the time to meet with you and have all these conversations, and then appeal it if it's not successful, is just such a burden on people who, quite frankly, have a lot more things to worry about than this. And it's very important to prevent a suspension or expulsion, but in the grand scheme of life, I can fully appreciate if you need to go to that job to put food on your family's table and you can't worry about that.
100%.
So that's a huge barrier, and it's really reduced to the idea that families aren't aware, but the reason they aren't aware is because the institution of education in Ontario doesn't help families appreciate those rights.
Okay, so off the top of my head, I got a little solution for you. So I know you're not super big on like social media like that, right? And so what came to my mind was, obviously I know you're probably super busy, But even like getting these messages out, I believe like maybe how about utilizing your social media in ways that you can be like, you know, make little videos and be like, if you're going through this, or if your kid's going through this, da 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 da, like, you know, kind of give them like some value that way.
Yeah,
What do you think about that?
People like you, Corey, inspire me to do that. It's funny. I legit just bought like a light. I just bought, like,
exactly.
that,
Okay, so just
camera
talking
stand.
head videos.
Yeah. It's really, and a lot of people are really good at making content. It's easy for me to sit here and have a conversation with you. It's harder for me to say, what do people want to hear?
We'll talk off camera. I'll teach you how to make honestly endless content. I'll teach you honestly, because obviously that's what we do good at. So I can definitely teach you how to make content, because I believe that you're in a niche market where if you just provide the information to people, it'll go viral. Like, for example, there was a guy that I follow. Like, I don't have kids, but I still follow him. He taught his 2-year-old boy how to read.
Oh,
yes, and two, and fluent too. Yeah, pretty fluent for a 2-year-old.
And he teaches you how to do that.
He teaches you how to do that, right? And that's just from talking head videos. And then he must have like 300,000 followers on Instagram.
Oh
now,
yeah.
You know, but just like if he was never creating content,
Who's gonna know?
Who's gonna know?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 100%. Like I said, like it's the people like you that are doing this that inspire me, and certainly, I think the first step in terms of getting the stuff, the next step is motivation to actually do it.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk off camera about that. But in doing like research for this episode, you gave me a couple articles to look at, right? And the one of them, I have it right here. It's really stuck out to me, and I want to read the title of it. It's Toronto students who cut class shouldn't end up in court. And the gist of it was skipping school can lead to fines, probation, and even imprisonment. That was shocking to me. And then also another thing that stood out to me was the Toronto District School Board had 167 cases in court in 2015. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I mentioned that I was at this legal clinic where they supported young people in education issues. It was in Toronto, and one of those issues was it fell under these large buckets, but this bucket was attendance rights. So when it comes to attendance, you have the right to attend a school, and from ages, I'm probably gonna get it wrong, but like 5 to 18, unless a bunch of exceptions. But you also have the responsibility to also attend school.
Define that.
So you have the right in Ontario to be able to go to school and get an education.
But you have to go to school because your responsibility.
The responsibility is also that you must be in school, unless, and there's a number of exceptions to this, but if you're between ages of 6 and 18 in Ontario, legally you're required to be in school. And
it's a legal thing.
It's a legal thing. The Education Act states that between those ages, unless either you get your Ontario Secondary School diploma early, then once you get that, you don't have to be in school anymore.
Okay.
Or you have reached a certain age, and at that point you're in control of your education. Or and it's also not necessarily the idea of not of having to go to school, but also the idea of consequences. So in theory, if you kept your child at home, what's going to happen? Well, between some ages, and I don't have those ages right away, you might be able to be fined for that.
Oh, okay.
And then to take it a step further, between certain ages, and I again don't recall off the top of my head, the parent gets fined. But between some other periods of ages, you as a student can get fined and penalized. So you have to understand that it's first a ticket. It's more of a ticket. Okay. A provincial offense is when you get like a parking ticket or something like that. There's this statute called the Provincial Offences Act, and these are things that it's called a quasi-criminal code. Okay. Or quasi-criminal law. So it's not criminal in the sense that you can go to jail or lose your rights or things like that. It's the idea that these are fines and penalties that are imposed on you. So the idea of truancy or skipping school.
Truancy is missing school, or
yeah. So not going to school or not attending school, skipping school for an illegitimate reason. So you cannot go to school because you're sick, maybe a holiday.
Let's say I just want to skip and stay at home, play like video games for a second. And that's truancy.
it wouldn't be a legal reason to skip school. So truancy would be, not attending school when you're supposed to be.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can get fined for that. And let me say that there are a bunch of different, I guess, nuances to all this.
Yeah.
Because nothing is ever black and white when it comes to law.
True.
And even when we think about when does a penalty arise, it's not necessarily right away that you get a ticket or you get a fine. So in the case of Toronto schools, my understanding at the time is that you might have a student who doesn't attend school for some time. Of course, the teachers in the school get concerned. They contact the parents, trying to figure out why. At some point, it doesn't resolve, so they escalate it.
Okay.
And I don't want to speak for the TDSB, and I don't know too many details about it, but I believe they had some kind of truancy officers or people maybe akin to like social workers who would look into
Like
the
keeping
reason.
track of certain students kind of thing.
Yeah, so you have kids with higher needs and not like necessarily related to academics, but like maybe some social needs. And if a student isn't at school, you might want to have your social worker or whoever's responsible for that look into why. Are they okay at home? Like, is something going on? So my understanding is that they might try to work with the family to get the child back in. But if that doesn't work, then they can refer it to you can give a ticket, and that ticket may require you to go to court. So in Toronto, they actually had a court, in like the criminal courts, Ontario Court of Justice, they had a whole section dedicated on one day of the week or one day of the month maybe to truancy court, where they would only hear kids, young, usually high school students, that were truant, not going to school, not even after interventions, didn't go back. So you have these students who are now at the court speaking to a judge, and the judge basically set some conditions for them. You must go to school or else.
And they still didn't.
So yes, so now you get a fine. The
Yeah.
judge gives you an order, a direction, and you must comply with that. Now the issue with this is when it comes to the Provincial Offences Act, you can be penalized for not following a court order. And one of the penalties for not following a court order is to be put in jail. So I
So
believe
that's no gray area though. That's kind of, it sounds a little black and white there.
So I think it's the idea that me skipping school doesn't mean I'm going to jail.
Yes. Yeah.
There are a lot of things that have to have occurred
Yeah.
for that student in that article to have wound up in jail. But
Okay.
the issue is in itself, why is it that a student who skips school ultimately could end up in jail?
So then it goes back to one of your first points that you made by getting into law is like about it could be the environment.
Yeah, 100%. The idea that a student could end up in jail because of skipping school isn't because they're inherently criminal. It's the idea that we're living in an environment where circumstances could be created for this person to end up in jail because they were skipping school. It doesn't make any sense. Or at least today, it doesn't make any sense anymore. Because there might have been some social purpose 100 years ago for why you would want to make sure kids were in school, not truant, for whatever reason that I maybe couldn't justify at that time either. But today, we understand that there are probably a million different reasons why a kid isn't going to school.
Exactly.
And I remember one case specifically where this child just had such deep-seated anxiety.
Why you couldn't get it?
Yeah, my man, literally, he would leave his house, tell his mom he was going, wait at the end of the driveway until she left, go back into school and not go back into the house and not go to school. The mom had no idea this kid was doing this for like weeks at a time.
Yeah.
So it finally came out that like he was just, I can't go, too anxious. Like I legit get sick going there because of the anxiety. Arguably, and this is why it's good to be able to appreciate your rights in the system as well, because one of the exemptions to having to mandatory attendance at school is if you're sick. If you have a medical condition, you can be exempt from school. And in that case, arguably, he had a medical condition, so he wasn't being truant.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So even going along in the article, I wrote down some points here, like reasons for kids that that would be like what I want to say here. reasons for kids not going to school. Like, it could be like their environment. Like, let's say they were in a poverty stricken like environment, and now they had to work.
100%. Yeah. And the idea, and this is why it's unfortunate that the school system doesn't actively share with you the range of possibilities available. Now, I'm talking about just your legal rights, but possibilities, because the practical reality is not everyone can work with the timelines of school, the day to day, like show up at 9 o'clock, leave by 3 o'clock, and just make your life fit within that. To your point, there are students who have much larger responsibilities within their household than the average child. So there are some kids who have to go to work to help support their family. And the typical kind of school day that you and I might have went to might not have been conducive to their kind of lifestyle. But the important thing to know is when it comes to school boards, they offer many different types of educational programming.
Okay.
So in some circumstances, you have schools or in some school boards, I'd be surprised if not most at this point, but you have the ability to like enter a program where you get all your coursework, but you have much more flexible timelines in terms of going into school or completing assignments and things like that. So to your point, there are plenty of students who don't have the ability to not be truant or not skip school. Okay. But the idea is you need to be able to get your education. So how are you going to get that responsibility? Yeah, that's right.
It makes more sense to me now hearing that like education is like your responsibility. Yeah. So now when these kids are going through the system and they're coming across these type of issues, you're advocating for them?
Yeah. So broadly speaking, my practice has this goal to support all stakeholders in Ontario's education system.
Can you break that down? Like stakeholders meaning?
Yeah, you have parents, you have students, you have teachers, you have administrators, you have school board trustees, you have the organization itself, you have even the person who doesn't have a child but lives in the community. The idea that education is only for the student or only affects a student or their parent is a very narrow view of education itself or the possibilities of the institution of education. We have schools, we have buildings, and those buildings are resources for communities as well. So the reason I'm saying I support all stakeholders is because I think to some degree, every person in Ontario has a stake in our education system. Yes. And my role is to support you to create or enhance that experience in the education system for everyone. And the way I do that is by individually addressing these issues, but acknowledging that there's a broader pattern of problems and issues that need to be addressed. So you come to me with something new, it now informs me that there's a larger problem here as well.
And you want to get to the root of it.
I want to get to the root of it. I want to be familiar with it because I'm also supporting and assisting the teachers, the administrators, the people on the other side of the table of you in this particular matter. And by me being able to appreciate and understand the issues you're facing, I can now go and have conversations with them when I'm working with them to say, well, this is the consequence of that decision or this needs to be addressed. Okay. Yeah.
So obviously you grew up with teachers all around you, and I have I'm on the fence about the education system.
Yeah, no, that's pretty fair. Yeah.
So I think now, like for example, like school wasn't for me, and I would consider myself now such a active learner, and I'm so curious and I love to learn, but going through the school system, like it can affect like your confidence by grades. I just felt like it wasn't for me. I was diagnosed with ADHD early, so it was a difficult task to stay in class and listen to a teacher for 3 hours, right? And then even hearing now, like for example, like your degree is like a 4-year degree, but today information is moving so fast. So by the time you come out of that 4-year degree, information could have changed already. Yeah. So what do you feel about that?
Well, things are always changing. One of the important things within professions that are, especially ones that are regulated, you have a professional obligation to always be learning.
Okay.
So one of my obligations as a lawyer is to complete professional development every year. I have a certain amount of hours and things
So
like
you're
that.
keeping up with the time.
I have to.
Yeah,
I have to. But more importantly, my clients and the people I work with keep me updated in terms of what the new issues are that are ongoing and things like that. And while I don't dig into the substance of education, I agree in many ways, like completely flawed.
Yeah.
I understand that the way in which we are able to even learn in a school can be significantly impacted by like that racist teacher or
Yes.
or
Yes.
or like the school board trustees that aren't equipping us with policies where we could do better or things like that. So yeah, in the education is really interesting because there's always a new issue going on. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in right now is the idea of, let me know your thoughts about this.
Yes.
Do you ever remember, did you read or have to read the To Kill a Mockingbird in school?
I did, but I don't remember it.
No, that's okay. That's okay. They said the N-word in that book.
Interesting.
I remember
What
I had
was the context?
like it was just like Jim Crow era.
Oh, okay.
They
Yeah.
like the book is ultimately about this black man who was accused of committing a crime, and it was N-word this, N-word that throughout the book.
Okay.
And teachers reading that book to students, what's their role in saying or not saying that word in an academic sense?
You want to know my thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
In the context of the book, I don't necessarily like if I was like of another color where that word was forbidden. I don't necessarily feel like I would be comfortable saying the word, but I would have an abbreviation like the N word.
Right.
Like
right,
reading
right,
if I had to read it or something like that. Something N word.
Yeah.
And I would explain, but this was not the N word that you hear in music. This is the hard ER.
Yeah.
So I would explain it like if I was like just to like not save my butt, but like just to be respectful still. But I do want them to get the context of how it was said because I think that's important. In terms of the book.
Well, you bring up a lot of good points that many teachers don't appreciate. So the first is, like if I'm a white person reading this book, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable to say the whole word with a hard ER at the end, but some people do. And the issue is that, and I remember a teacher of mine doing that, and in hindsight now I understand why I felt uncomfortable with it. But I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
All these other white kids didn't necessarily
understand.
I don't think they would have felt the same way I felt if I just heard like one of a couple of black kids in the room hearing the N-word said out loud.
True.
They probably don't get why I feel kind of a visceral reaction to it. But the idea that you wouldn't want to have a person like me feel that way is a huge consideration that many teachers don't think about. And it's one of the reasons why this is an interesting issue today is this an academic thing where you can kind of protect it with this idea that it's all in the spirit of learning? Or even if one kid feels uncomfortable, we need to take that word out.
I don't think it's a black or white thing. I think it's a learning as you go thing because like I said, like.
But so why should I be harmed for you to learn?
So for example, that's why I don't think it's black and white, only because like I think there's ways around it. Like if you're offended, I feel like we have to come to solutions that we can still tell this story, but respect you.
So one of the questions is, why are we even telling stories where you have the N-word in it?
Because it's a part of our history.
Whose history?
I would say.
Why can't I learn about my history without having that degradation to my people?
Okay, so here's we can go in the education. So this is the one problem I do have with the education system.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it teaches us that being black started with slavery.
Right.
And I hate that.
Right. So why are we introducing books where?
So I don't like that. I feel like it's a little bit of a separate issue, but
No, I don't think it is, and it comes back to the case where why do we have to have a policy where
we have to learn about slavery or
like why are we putting people in positions where you would have to say or hear this word when there's so many other things
to
that
teach
we can
about.
teach?
I agree with that. I 100% agree with that because ultimately it's a reminder of being less than. and I don't like that. I don't
Yeah,
like
yeah,
teaching
yeah.
that to kids.
Yeah.
Because why aren't we hearing about excuse me if I forget his say his name wrong, Mansu Mensa, which is like the the richest black man to ever live.
Right.
We never hear about him
exactly.
and his story, but yet we're teaching about people that were whipped, slavery, all this stuff. Like, you know, like that's my issue with what's being taught in the schools. Does that make sense?
No, it completely makes sense. And let's take it to a different level. Even in universities, I believe University of Ottawa, I think it was, there was a professor who used the N-word, hard ER, and basically contextualized it in the sense that this is academic freedom. We're here to discuss the...
Tell that to Kanye. Interesting.
But it's the idea that why does anyone's learning in this classroom that I'm in have to come at the expense of my dignity? And
that's such a European. Okay, go ahead.
But like we don't have to just talk about the N-word. Any slur of any kind, any epithet that's used. Why is it necessary to include that kind of language to be able to make a point?
Okay, see, I'm like on the fence. I can see both because again, I prefer, for example, like when it comes to like Black history, I prefer us being taught before pre-slavery, right?
Right.
But if it has to be taught, the context of what happened, I do believe is important. It's a tough one.
And let me try to make it not tough for you.
Okay.
So what this whole argument is grounded in the idea of human rights.
Okay.
And there's a case called, it doesn't really matter what it is, but it's called Fraser versus Canada and the Attorney General. There's a long, kind of, to be frank, boring kind of fact pattern behind it.
Okay.
But it's the idea of substantive equality or equity. And what it's trying to say is that neutral policies or practices, things that apply to everyone, it still can have a detrimental impact on individuals. And you have to appreciate that even though you didn't intend for it to be neutral,
I agree.
It's going to have an impact on some people. And you have to understand that impact doesn't have to be from everyone within that group, but you have to appreciate that some people will be impacted by it. You also have to appreciate that each group might have a historical context in which that policy or a neutral policy or practice
won't understand.
It changes things for them. Yeah, it could have been the case that we grew up together, but if we're from different backgrounds, I have a history that comes with my background, whatever it is, and this practice or policy speaks in a negative way to that history that I'm coming from. Why is it that we both have to have that policy applied in the same way?
True.
When I'm the one who's affected more negatively from it.
Okay.
So it's the idea that if we're in a classroom, we're all having to read this book, and this practice is completely neutral because no one's hearing it in a different way. Everyone's getting the same story.
Yeah.
But it's the history that I'm coming with that
affects you different.
It affects me differently.
Fair.
And the idea that we want to live in a more equitable society has to consider that there are different ways people react to different things.
Okay.
And if we care at all about making sure that people are comfortable in the environment, especially in education, we have to be more attuned to the fact that some people are going to be uncomfortable in a situation in a classroom where I'm saying the N-word. And if we care about, and part of the Education Act is ensuring that all students are able to feel safe and well-being. If we care about that, if we really care about that, we're going to take it seriously enough to say, let's not have language that can make any child feel that way.
So maybe it's taking the books out?
Some schools have done that. Some schools have had policies where you can't say it. But yeah, it's I don't know if you've ever heard of the book Fahrenheit 9/11. I think it was that. I can't remember. It was a book that was like banned, and there's a story about it being banned, I think. But it might be problematic to also ban books.
See, that's the only thing. That's the mindset that I was coming from. Like, if you ban these things or kids are not learning certain things, then it's like, is it like erasing history almost?
It's a hard
it's
question.
Hard. It's hard, you know.
But those are, and to be honest, I leave that kind of policy decision making to the people who make those decisions.
Yeah.
I'm more invested in the arguments. Like, give me a side, and I'll fight on that side. I'll give you the arguments either which way. But I find it interesting because I'm arguing one side, but I can go the other. Why you should be able to say it if I wanted to. And that's the interesting part about these legal issues to me in education, because you have something to say about it. Everyone has some kind of value in the education system. You have a valuable perspective to give. Mostly because you went through it yourself.
100%.
You know what it was like. You can put yourself and relate to it in the situation. So your opinion very much matters. So it's a very interesting, it's interesting for me to speak to people about education issues because all these perspectives are very legitimate.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so you deal with the discipline side of teachers and ECE workers.
Yeah.
How does that go? And how does it get to you?
Yeah.
And how does it get to that point?
Yeah, well, so the cool thing is, when we talk about students, kindergarten to grade 12, suspension and expulsion, talked about progressive discipline mitigating factors. When we talked about undergrad students, academic appeals, progressive discipline mitigating factors. These are about being disciplined for some breach of a code of conduct or rules or whatever the case is. When we're talking about professional regulation, it's the same principles. So if a teacher is being disciplined, it's the same way a student is being disciplined for. Broadly speaking, the idea of being disciplined for.
So in those cases, are teachers coming to you to like
some teachers do
fight their rights, that kind of thing, or
So when it comes to professional regulation, it's because some professions have a regulatory body. For example, the Law Society.
What does that mean? Sorry, regulatory body.
Yeah. So there is basically an area of practice, a profession that someone decided that it's in the public interest to regulate the standards of these people who practice in this profession.
Okay.
So the regulator sets out your professional responsibilities that you owe the public and perhaps rules of practice that you should follow for the same standard to be expected. If I'm going to a doctor, I need my doctor to meet some minimal thresholds, right? I need my lawyer to understand the basic stuff. So that's why you must have this level of education, all this stuff. So across the board, you can be confident that whatever professional you get in this province meets a certain standard.
Okay.
So when people fall below that standard, the regulator then steps in and says, hey, we need to talk. Now, depending on the seriousness of the allegations, for example, it could be maybe you got your books wrong and someone complained about an invoice or something. They'll look into it. Maybe it was an error, correct it, we're fine.
Okay.
But then you have people who are literally stealing money from their clients. And now it's a bigger issue than just a slap on the wrist.
That's a law thing.
Yeah. So when it comes to your professional regulator, in this case, teachers, you have the Ontario College of Teachers that says, we have some standards that you have to follow. And if you don't follow those standards, or you're alleged to have not followed those standards, we're going to investigate it. And then if we find against you, then you're going to get penalized for that. And by the way, when it comes to the Ontario College of Teachers, they have this thing called the Blue Books.
What is that?
The Blue Books or the Pink Pages? One of those. It's a very cool.
Almost like every offense in there?
It tells you whoever's been basically alleged of a violation. And
it's like an offenders list.
Yeah. No, legit. And it's a long list. You'd be surprised about how many things are going on.
Can the public get that?
Of course. Yeah. You can look online, I'm pretty sure. It publishes every, probably monthly.
We have some high school teachers that might be in that.
Oh no. Yeah, this is public because remember, it's in the public interest to protect the public. You want to make sure the standards are at a certain level. When people fall below that, you might not want that person practicing anymore.
Like
so you let them know
register.
that this person is all the professional regulators will make a post about their whatever disciplinary decision has been made.
Yeah.
So when teachers come to me, and they don't always come to me first because they have a union. And the
teachers union.
The union sometimes or most often provides them with some counsel to support them. Not everyone trusts their union. Some people look for outside counsel, and that's their right. So some circumstances, I am able to support people who want a private practicing lawyer to assist them.
Makes sense. There's a lot to this. Holy smokes, because it goes deep.
It's man, the institution of education is huge. I think many of the different cities across the province, their largest employer is a school board.
Interesting.
I think Peel Board is the largest employer in Brampton and Mississauga. I think. In Hamilton, McMaster University is the largest employer in that city. So when we talk about institutions, like I said, stakeholders. You have the people that are teaching. You have the students. You have the
society,
the administrator. Everyone's a part of it. So there's so many different issues when you think about it like that. Everyone is gonna have some rights and responsibilities, and when either of those become infringed, that's an issue of law. So yeah.
Okay, so you also deal with bullying, right? So for example, let me know if it works like this. So I'm a parent, and my child is coming home to me, and they're like, I'm being bullied, da 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 da, and I'm going to the principal, and let's say I don't think they're necessarily taking it as serious as my child's telling me. Then do I contact you, or how does that work? How do you deal with bullying?
Yeah. So you have these large area of issues. Bullying is one of them.
Okay.
And my role is to figure out what's the outcome that you're looking for. So is it the case that you don't want your child to be with a certain student? Do you need a safety plan of some sort? Do we need to think about how to protect your child in that circumstance? Or is it more serious in that, like, damage has happened? Like, my child has been harmed significantly to the point where I need some kind of remedy for this, compensation, monetary, non-monetary, things like that.
Jeez.
Depending on what the outcome is that you're looking for, it informs me of how I'm going to address it.
Okay.
So if we're talking about bullying, and there are some tragic cases of bullying, even in the past few years out of Hamilton, that kid that got stabbed at school and passed away.
I think I heard about that.
Yeah. That came from bullying.
Yeah.
There is an interesting case a few years ago about a black student in Ottawa who had this group of friends. He was a mixed kid, and other kids were white. They were close by all means at first, but then they started to kind of taunt him, say some racist stuff towards him, and bully him over the course of some time. He eventually snaps and says,
that's it.
Yeah, he knew what to do afterwards. So and let's say violence isn't always physical.
True.
There's verbal violence, racial violence, all these different types of things that don't necessarily impact you physically, but that kid's health mentally was substantially affected by the taunting, the saying the N-word to him, things like that.
And that's where you come in.
To make the arguments, of course. So I wasn't a part of that case, but this case illustrated the responsibility of the school. So the school had disciplined him for fighting back. But the mom, who was a boss, she decided to sue the school for not looking after him. And it kind of fleshed out some of the legal issues that were there. And one of the legal issues, an important legal principle that I think everyone should remember, is that everyone... so when you have specific professions, of course, teachers in this particular circumstance, you owe a duty of care to a student. That means you have a obligation or responsibility towards them. In this case, it was keeping them safe. Now, what's the standard of that care? So how far do I have to go to make sure that they're safe?
Okay.
The standard of care for a teacher in Ontario is that of a reasonably prudent parent.
What does that even mean?
Now, when it comes to law, the word reasonable is everywhere,
what does that mean?
And it's
that's
just,
like almost like that probable thing.
It's open to interpretation, but the idea here is that a reasonable parent would know when their child is being bullied or is not being the same or a little bit quiet, or I would go ask, what's wrong? Are you okay? Did those kids do something to you? What did they do? Like, ask some questions. A reasonably prudent parent would have taken steps to figure out why this kid might have felt that way even before or after he fought back. So the case basically said they fell below that standard. And so you were responsible for the racial bullying and for basically this kid fighting back. So the case, it wasn't worth a lot of money, but the idea of it is that
compensation for it.
A few $1,000s, but it was so much more resources that were spent in the whole process that the money wasn't the significant thing. It was the decision. And the decision ultimately reminded that school and the schools in general about the standard and duty of care owed by a teacher in the school. And that's to make sure, especially when it comes to bullying, that you can't just turn a blind eye. If you know a kid is like down, like kind of sad,
Slouching.
noticeable changes, you have arguably a responsibility to inquire
what's going on.
Of course, because a reasonably prudent parent, a parent who is concerned about the safety of their child, would want to ask these obvious questions. And then after being informed of those answers, you take the necessary step, because not every child is going to tell you what's wrong.
Exactly.
So that's when it comes to bullying, you need to. That's one of the areas where you can like figure out what to do next. Is there some duty of care that was not provided there? Was there kind of did it fall below standards? And again, when we talk about standards, we're thinking about the professional regulator.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're thinking about recourse, what you can do in that circumstance is maybe that teacher didn't meet their standards of care. Should the College of Teachers be informed about that? Then the college does an investigation,
Mm-hmm.
and then that teacher, at the very least, can know that I'm being looked at.
Okay.
I need to act better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one form of recourse for parents. Another one, in bullying cases especially, is the idea that, especially when it comes to racial discrimination, human rights. And it's different between like pushing a kid and saying haha, and then pushing a kid and saying the N-word.
Oh, yeah.
That's
'Cause that comes from probably home too.
It probably, like, who knows where it's coming from.
Yeah.
But it's a different level of escalation now.
True.
And how a school board deals with things like that has to be different from a regular push.
Yes, absolutely.
And when they don't deal with things like that, it might create an opportunity for recourse in the Human Rights Tribunal, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So my cases often look at what are the human rights allegations here,
Mm-hmm.
and are we able to establish a human rights argument for the tribunal
Mm-hmm.
against the school board generally.
Okay, geez. So you also look or have cases with the accommodation of special needs. What does that look like? What do your cases look like there? So just for the parents that do have children with special needs, like they can kind of know what's going on, what should they hold the teacher's standards by or something like that?
Yeah. No, accommodations is a big thing. In the Human Rights Tribunal, it's usually a lot of accommodation-related issues when it comes to school boards. So the idea of accommodations is that and accommodations is a two-way street. It basically focuses on disability. And disability is a very broad term underneath the Human Rights Code. It can look a lot of different ways of disability. It could be physical, mental,
Learning
emotional,
disability.
all these different things that in the case law is pretty clear. It's broad.
Okay.
It really depends on what the circumstances are. But ideally, you should have some medical evidence of it as well. So the idea of accommodations is it's a two-way street. You have an obligation to tell me that you have a disability and that you need to be accommodated.
Yes.
And I have an obligation to make sure that need is met. But I don't have an obligation to do whatever you are telling me to do to fulfill that accommodation. So if you're telling me, Alex, I need more time on this test, give me 2 weeks to finish my test.
Yeah.
And you're saying it's my anxiety that's preventing me from doing it. And I might not ask you to give me evidence of it, but there's evidence of it if necessary.
Yeah.
And I say 2 weeks is too long. Maybe I'll give you a week. Maybe that meets your accommodation needs. Maybe it doesn't. You would have to tell me whether or not it meets it or not.
Yeah.
Because it's a back and forth thing. If I'm telling you, no, 2 weeks is too much, 1 week is what you have to give me evidence that is not sufficient accommodations for me to come back and reevaluate and give you another accommodation. So when it comes to accommodation in schools generally, you have to appreciate that I have an obligation as the person who is claiming that right, and my expectation is that the organization is going to fulfill my needs by providing me an accommodation that meets my needs. It doesn't have to look exactly like what it is I'm asking for, but it has to support the needs that I'm asking for. That need to be met. The needs that need to be met.
Okay, shoot. Yeah. So you got a lot of different cases on your table.
Yeah. Like I said, diverse.
Are you busy a lot of, like, obviously, but like how busy are you? With these type of cases.
Yeah. When it comes to busy, it's not an issue of like volume.
Okay.
And I remember reading or seeing it somewhere, but when you get too busy, for example, you're doing one of two things wrong. Either you're not charging enough.
Yeah. I like that.
Or you're doing a thing that no one else can do and everyone's coming to you. At which point you charge more anyway.
Yes, exactly.
So when it comes to my practice, I don't necessarily have a high volume because it's such a niche kind of thing to do. I'm able to support with people who are not well-resourced to a certain extent.
Okay.
But I have bills to pay as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And many times the cases I do take are contingency fee-based, meaning...
What does that mean?
Yeah, so I'm able to support you, but a contingency fee arrangement is where you're looking for some form of a monetary award.
Okay.
And I get a percentage of that award if
Oh,
we're successful.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. Sometimes I have a mixed arrangement where you have to pay a small fee
And
initially.
monetary.
Yeah,
Okay, makes sense.
initially for me to maybe draft some documents,
Mm-hmm.
but then I'll take on the contingency fee. Some lawyers do only an hourly pay, so whenever I'm doing work for you, I'm charging you, I'm billing
Yeah.
you as we go, basically, or they charge you a flat rate.
Mm-hmm.
And these may be a larger barrier to accessing legal services.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to be as kind of accessible as possible.
Okay.
Understanding that I have a very niche practice that I really can't provide a lot of people with services at this time. I would
Yes.
love to, but I have to be a lot more business oriented and figure out how do I efficiently do the business thing, do the work I like, and address the issues I want to in the system.
Has that been a challenge for you?
It has a challenge in the sense that I knew what I was doing, so yes, it was challenging and let me stick to my plan and go through with it. But not challenging in the sense that I keep hitting barriers and I don't know what to do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I never actually wanted to be a private practicing lawyer or an entrepreneur
Yeah.
at all. I was in law school, and like I mentioned, a lot of people in England, and by the way, we're in the center of London, like London proper, with the biggest law firms in the world. Like this is the center of almost the legal world in the world, literally.
Yeah.
A lot of the people there were interested in business law or this corporate law, things that were very lucrative.
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to do private practice, and I, like I said, wanted to do legal aid for a long time.
Yeah.
I remember telling one of my friends at the time, like legal aid has great benefits. I can't wait to work there. And I remember him laughing and saying, benefits? And I was like so taken aback because I've always been, from a family that does public service.
Yeah.
Like benefits is, and
It's a
especially
big thing.
It's a big thing, and especially from a Jamaican family, I think working for the government in some capacity,
It's an honor.
It's an honor.
Yeah,
it's
honor.
something highly looked upon.
Yeah.
So never did it come across my mind like, let me open my own practice. It was always, how do I do public service in some way? And until that experience, I realized the different opportunities that came with law, because people were talking about opening their own practice or joining a business and things like that. So, when it comes to this business now, I'm realizing it's a lot more fun to now be able to do things that typically weren't done before.
True.
I think there's always a limitation.
You're like leading the way. Like you're opening a path.
Yeah. Like, so my first experience with that personal injury law firm, I thought this is what all private practicing lawyers were like.
Yeah.
All private businesses, legal businesses were like. And I realized, no, that's just how they did it. And there's nothing preventing me from doing it in a different way. And one of the important things about my business is I want it to be a social enterprise. Meaning, I want to be able to make a profit and be able to earn a living.
Yeah.
But I want to be able to contribute socially as well. How do I do
movement.
work? Yeah. How do I do work that not only benefits me, but how does it give back in some way? And that's really the middle ground I was able to achieve.
Purposeful work.
Purposeful work, 100%. Yeah. And on my terms as well. And that was the important thing about not doing legal aid to me, doing the exact kind of work I wanted, but also not kind of entering this more corporate, like private, typical legal world where it's a little bit more cold and not necessarily addressing the issues that I would want to be addressing.
Okay.
So it's this kind of merging of the middle grounds for me.
Okay, that's what's up. So, when it's all said and done, what type of impact do you want to leave?
Yeah, I don't think... So I understand very well that I'm not going to be here forever, but I want to be able to create something that's going to be here forever. And what ideally I would love to see in terms of what I'm building is it's bigger than me. I want to be able to leave this and let it run. I think that there's a huge gap in education law services, especially from the holistic lens that I'm trying to take it from. You have lawyers that work with the with the school boards or the institutions who have their interests at mind. You have lawyers who sometimes take on cases for individuals against these big institutions. But I want to be able to say, I do both. And that's a benefit to you regardless of what side you're on.
Yeah. You just want to get it right.
Yeah. And it's one thing we have to appreciate as well is being right isn't always the goal.
So I guess what I mean is not everyone's not being right, and not necessarily everyone coexisting within a space.
Yeah.
That's what
No, 100%. And I don't think many people appreciate this, but especially when the idea that you can win in very like highly emotionally charged situations is not a good perspective to look at, because you might win, but at the expense of the breakdown of the relationship between you and the other party.
Yeah.
Ideally, schools are going to see the same parent who has a grievance with you for the next, 10 years the kid is in the school board?
Yeah.
Why do you want to break down that relationship for a win? And my perspective is, especially when I'm working with either party, is to help them appreciate winning isn't you kind of, it's not a zero-sum game. One person doesn't have to lose. How do we work towards an outcome in the best interest of everyone, whatever that looks like? And I necessarily think that you have to appreciate both parties' perspective. And so my point is, an organization that only works with, a law firm or lawyers that only work with organizations aren't going to have the perspective of the parents.
True.
And the lawyers who work with parents individually
So one-sided.
might not have that perspective of the organization. So having that holistic kind of organization that can be consulted for issues that you don't want to break down relationships, but you want to find a solution. That's what I want to create, and that's the legacy I think I want to leave behind, so that you can tap into this organization that gets you to this outcome that doesn't have a zero-sum end.
I think that's so important that you said that you can work on either side. I don't really hear that much.
Yeah, and to some extent, lawyers are prohibited from. It's called a conflict of interest.
Oh, true.
So
that makes sense.
For example, if I'm representing a client, an individual, as parent or student, I can't be on the other side of the table as well.
Yeah, okay.
In that same issue. Now, some, broadly speaking, organizations probably won't take me just because I've
been on the other side
before. I've been on the other side before, yeah.
Interesting.
It might be the case that, like, we know, like, we're just not comfortable in working with you, or maybe you are going to take more cases against us. And so, and it's a very rational perspective. I have an obligation to act in the complete interest of my client. And sometimes I don't want to put myself in a situation where I can't act in the complete interest. Because if I'm thinking about how this impacts this other party and want to mitigate some of that loss for the other party, I'm not acting, and there's a term for it, I can't remember what it is immediately, but I'm not acting to the best ability for my client. So that's the challenge, in theory, I would face. But I don't think it takes away from the fact that, and this is the strategy I've done, I work with some school boards, and I don't work with others.
Why?
For example, it's a lot more common for me to have people in my surrounding area who tap into me to support them with the local school boards.
Okay, makes sense.
So working with those school boards might not be practical because there's so many people who are in my community that need my support. So I don't want to conflict myself out of that.
Okay.
But there are more further school boards where I don't know the people in those communities. They might not know me. But those school boards could benefit from someone like me with those perspective of the family perspective. So I can now advise you on how to better deal with some of these issues you're facing. So it's more of a location thing now. Like, where am I drawing the line about who I'm helping? Yeah. So I'm creating that kind of barrier.
So you have a map out there and say, I'm going to take over this area.
I have a list of school boards I can't work with. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have two questions that we will ask every guest on the show. And the first one is, what is the best advice that you've gotten, and what is the worst advice you've gotten? And you don't got to say any names, obviously.
The best advice I've gotten. Yeah, I was gonna say. I was just about to say. I don't know if I take everyone's advice. I take pieces of it, and then I realized that was advice that I got.
Okay.
Yeah. So the advice is everyone is gonna have their own perspective on everything. Someone's gonna tell you this is how I did it, and they're legitimately might have that pathway, that blueprint might have worked for them.
For their experience.
Exactly. And the value of you being able to speak to someone and learn from them is not in taking exactly what they did, but to take from it what you need, what you can apply to yourself. And it's when I read all these books about some of the books I mentioned tonight, it wasn't about taking everything that they have
Like step by step.
Exactly. It's those little pieces that did stick with me where I see some application. That's one of the reasons why I love the Robert Greene books.
I like him too.
Yeah,
I like him.
He understands that it's not like a end-to-end read.
Exactly.
You step back in when you needed to look into it, right? So that for sure is the best advice I've ever heard. Just be able to borrow what you need, take what you can, and apply it when you need it. So the worst advice, the worst advice, what I will say is that sometimes your loved ones want to be able to look out for you in your best interests. In doing so, they put a lot of their limitations on you as well.
Insecurities.
Not even, insecurity is a part of it, but also wanting to, rather than see you go for it all and fail, they'd rather you like aim a little bit lower so you can
play
succeed.
Fair.
So, I guess a bit of some bad advice would have been to, and I'm more paraphrasing and kind of reducing it, but basically don't go for it all with the potential of you failing. Go for the safe bet and guarantee your success. That's not the exact words, but my point is I don't want to have those limitations placed on me just because you don't see the vision I see or you don't know what I'm capable of.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Okay. And on the show, we like to make predictions. So in 5 years, I'm like, Alex, he said he was going to do that. And we have it on camera, right? So where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years. I'm right now trying to figure out how to grow. How do I take this from me? And I have a small team with me right now.
How many?
I have my law student. Shout out to Martin. Jennifer, she's my social media manager.
Okay.
My small team is made up just of them, but they do so much on the behind the scenes that make me do what I can do today. It frees up a lot of my time. But I want to be able to expand and not only get bigger for a lot of it, of course, my selfish reasons, but to be able to give the services and create the change that I want to. I want to step into, in the months to come, you'll see some of the moves, but working with some other people, a part of my organization, to provide civil litigation.
Okay.
I don't do civil litigation right now, but a lot of education law issues could lend itself to like a court battle with lawyers from the school board or whoever.
Okay.
So some civil litigation cases might come up because of who I might be working with soon.
Okay.
But I want to take that a broader scope of that. Again, education has so many different layers to it.
Yes.
When we talk about school boards, real estate is a whole thing in school boards as well.
Interesting.
They have to figure out where the zoning where they're going to place all that stuff. Yeah. So it's being able to tap into these different areas that I don't practice.
Yeah, but you can have a person there.
Exactly.
So that's when you're a beast.
Exactly. So that's what I'm aiming for. And 5 years from now, I think it can happen. But right now, I'm only able to practice in Ontario.
Okay.
But there's no one else doing what I'm doing across the country, I'm sure. And I want to be able to nationalize and be like that. Like that's the law firm that deals with education stuff. That's right.
Okay, dope. So let everybody know where they can contact you, just in case someone hears this, like, I need to talk to that guy.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you can reach me at my website, www.baticlegal.ca. Hit me up on email at alex@baticlegal.ca, or reach me directly on my phone line, 905-872-3222. But you know what? They might be able to look that up, but I'm going to give you something where you can refer to it right away.
Thank you.
I got you, of course, my favorite beverage, by the way.
Thank you.
We're going to
Thank
have
you.
to take a sip
Thank
afterwards.
you. Should I open it now? Or?
Yeah, open it. Open
Alright,
it.
lit.
Yeah, got you some pens on there where you can see the name and the number and some cards
Write
for your
the
reference.
magic plans down. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And also, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And I do want to talk like off camera, like how you start to create your content, because even you mentioned you have a social media manager.
Yeah, that's right.
And even I can give you guys ideas on how to create endless content.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, because I feel like if you
There's a hack for it already.
Yeah. I feel like if you can get your voice out there to like the social media world, you'll start to see a big difference.
Okay.
Jeez.
This is a little sweet wine, but I like juice basically, and that's some juice with a little bit of alcohol in it.
Okay,
basically.
thank you, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Everything black on black. If I study that facts on facts.